Joshua Atkinson. He first came to the fellowship in 1977, just before we did the 40 Days in the Wilderness. And Joshua was one of the people who ran the fellowship while a group of us were out of town doing 40 Days in the Wilderness, because the fellowship had to stay open.
Right.
And Joshua ran it.
Yeah.
And Joshua is an ILC guide. He's married to Analia Atkinson, who you will meet later in this presentation. And Joshua has also studied, Joshua and Analia have studied the Course in Miracles and been teachers of the Course in Miracles throughout the world. And Joshua taught all over the country, and I don't know if you ever taught.
I taught in England and
in
Scotland.
England and Scotland. And he's a brother, and we love him. And he's going to talk about his years with the Fellowship of the Inner Light.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. I think the best place for me to start would be to say, Paul Solomon asked me a question when I first met him in 1977. I was taking an ILC class in Evansville, Indiana. And my beautiful wife, who was then married to someone else, I immediately fell in love with because of her spirit. I immediately fell in love with the fellowship because I could see the joy and the truth that was being shared, and it was very profound. But I was also very new to a lot of this, and Paul did me a big favor. A few days into the course, he looked at me. I was sitting in the front row because I was a very eager beaver student. He looked at me and he said, "Joshua, you don't love yourself very much, do you?" And I thought, well, I've never even considered that question. And the more I pondered it, the more I realized how true that was. And the way he asked it, though, was with a wry grin and a twinkle in his eye. So what that helped me realize is that this guy had something to teach that I wanted to learn. And I didn't know then, but now I do know that it simply boiled down to love. And what Paul did for me and countless others in the course of our time with the fellowship was that he portrayed unconditional love, he taught unconditional love, he encouraged unconditional love. Only in the fellowship could I call one of my friends at 2 a.m. and say, "I have a flat tire, come fix it," and they'd be there. That's the kind of love that was present and still is. So Paul offered a tremendous start for me with the fellowship, and over the course of time with studying with Paul and having instruction, being introduced to countless great teachers who had impact and still impact me in my day-to-day life, as I think about Rabbi Gelberman and Sir George Trevelyan and just the list goes on and on. One of the things that Paul said to me in one of my walks with him in a garden up at Carmel in the Valley, he looked at me and looked through me and in me and around me, and he said, "Joshua, you've got to know your source. You've got to know your source." And I didn't really know what he meant at that point at all, but since him having said that to me, I pondered that, thought about it, and I will say that Paul, if you're listening, I'm getting to know my source, and I'm very grateful for that bit of encouragement and wise advice. One of the things about Paul that I think is worth saying also is that I know that he had many irons and many fires and was a world traveler and teacher and stayed busy countless hours beyond what I would even consider sane. And his bottom line, though, was that he was always encouraging us to be a family, and a spiritual family, one that that recognized the value in each and encouraged that in each and supported that in each of us. And that legacy that he began with this group and the groups that have come since, and some that have never met Paul, I think that the content of that desire to have family, spiritual family, and to know each other in a place and from a place of love continues. So, I call it a legacy, but it's really a present experience also. There's no time that's related to that, and that's a timeless teaching that Paul offered, and it still exists. So I don't know what else to say about Paul. He was. I kept at arm's length from him. He was so intense. Sometimes I just didn't want to be caught up in all the hubbub. So, and he respected that with me. And we had a few private conversations. And one of them he said to me, he said, Joshua, if you were a dream symbol for me, your symbol would be one of gentleness. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll take that. And so I felt like Paul really respected me as much as I respected him, and still does. Still, on occasion, we'll get a visit or a little nudge on the shoulder, a little whisper in the ear, and I know it's Paul. So.
Can you describe some of those experiences?
Well, one of the last ones was at last year's family gathering. I think I've had one or two since, but at last year's family gathering, I was tasked to do a presentation of some sort, and I thought, what in the hell am I going to do? And so I concocted something, and I was kind of spinning with it a little bit, and then I said, I'm just not going to worry about it. And that whisper in the ear, it came in while I was asleep, but I was awake. And Paul said, don't worry about it. You'll be just fine. Just be who you are. That's all you got to do. So I thought about that for this trip, this family gathering. And I don't have any role in this one other than to assist my wife with the presentation she's doing. So I'm cruising this time, just going to enjoy it enjoy the gathering as a customer. And there were other times, Paul. I don't even like to use the word Paul when I think about him now, because his being is so much more than what we would ever think of as an individual and as a person and as a name. It's the same as it's the same spirit that we all are, and he's readily available in that spirit for anybody that would care to listen. And I'm sure he's busy doing other things too, but I do recognize that the fellowship of the inner light was an idea that was not born just in one man. This was a cooperative venture. And Paul will tell you, and the readings will tell you, that the White Brotherhood was part and parcel of that there's a reason that this place was born and it still exists. And the readings speak to that, and I think it's still very obvious that there is a force that exists here. I can't come to the fellowship except sometimes and help but cry, because it's so, it's so present. This probably shouldn't go on YouTube, but the last time I heard Amazing Grace here, I had a cold, and if you're crying with a cold and you're holding somebody's hands and the mucus is running, what do you do?
There's tissue right there.
Right. But Paul, I've just felt really blessed by Paul. He trusted me with Felton Jones, who was his teacher. He had me be his little secretary, chauffeur kind of guy for a while, and I think that's because he wanted to gift me with some of Felton. And I got to especially in my thinking, be gifted with Sir George Trevelyan. I got to do the same thing, be a chauffeur and a secretary of sorts, and just, I mean, the exposure just goes on and on. But the biggest gift is Paul, that I've received from Paul, was Course in Miracles, with his introduction to the fellowship back in '77, Judy Scutch. And, that was another nudge I got. Gerald Jampolsky was on Kauai about 3 or 4 years ago, and speaking at, no, it's been longer than that, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. He was speaking at a service, church service there, and Paul had come to me the night before, and he said, I want you to get a hold of Jerry and tell him I'm cheering him on. And that was all he said. So I felt a little bit shy to do that because I didn't know Jerry Jampolsky that well, but I found when it was group picture time there, Jerry and I are sitting side by side. So
Jerry Jampolsky is the author.
Well, he's been a Course in Miracles teacher and author of numerous books. And he founded Attitudinal Healing. Loves Lingo of Fear.
Loves Lingo of Fear.
Yeah, that's his big one, right?
No.
Yeah, or just Google Oprah and Gerald Jampolsky. That's how you can get a taste of Gerald Jampolsky. Oprah actually said to him in one of those interviews I was watching that he just came out with like 2 or 3 sentences about something, and she just was in. That's the most profound thing I've ever heard, she said. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm sitting side by side with him at the church service, and I said, I used to hang with the Fellowship of the Inner Light and Paul Solomon. He said, Paul Solomon, yeah, of course. Yeah, Paul. And he said, yeah, I know he's passed away. I said, yeah, but I said to him, he got a little message for you. And he just wants you to know that he's cheering you on from the other side. And Gerald Jampolsky, at age 80-something now, he just lit up like a schoolboy. And he says, I'm so happy to hear that. I need all the help I can get.
Right. Wasn't he the one that showed up with all those children that had cancer?
That was the attitudinal healing piece.
And he came to one of the conferences and brought the children?
No, that I don't remember.
No?
I don't remember that part.
I remember...
I remember he was at the family gathering in 1977, and he did the Course in Miracles thing then with Judy Scutch, but I don't remember the rest of it.
Wasn't he the one? There was somebody. Wasn't it Gerald Jampolsky?
The what?
Wasn't it Gerald Jampolsky that came here with all the children
Yes.
that had cancer?
And that was at the Hilton's. That was
At the Hilton.
Oh, the Triune Healing Conference,
The Triune Healing Conference, yeah.
which I helped direct, so I should know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just remembering that because I don't think we expected all those children. And then all these children came, all these cancer children who had cancer. It was
Right.
amazing.
There's a rainbow behind every
Yeah.
dark cloud, was the name of the book that these kids had put
Oh.
together. And from that, Grace made a calendar of fellowship kids doing something like that.
Wow.
Their
Nice.
thought, and it was like a fundraiser.
Right.
At least it broke even.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah. One more story.
It was a class.
Let her ask that after.
What's that?
Heidi asked how we met.
Oh, it's a great story,
Yeah, we'll put that one in too.
and it even gets better.
Maybe
It's
you
because
ought to
how I
start with
chased
that
her
one
for
before the
years
baby
before I caught her.
question. Don't go into the
I'll tell you the chasing stories. Okay, so I just wanted to relate one more short story about Paul that was directly related to our family, my wife and myself, and our daughter, who was born with some handicaps, multiple handicaps actually, and we knew from early on, maybe day 2 or day 3, as I recall, that she had some abnormalities in her heart, and there was, it was obvious that there was going to need to be some operations and such, but she wasn't big enough. So if she could make it to age 2, then these things would occur. So, that left us both in a place where we needed some guidance and some support, and we went to Paul and brought our daughter to him for two reasons. One was to arrange for a christening, and then the other was, of course, to hear what Paul had to say. And what he had to say, the most specific thing that affected me was that when he held the baby, and he held the baby in such a beautiful way. I mean, you know, you could. It was a painting, the way he held the child, and you could see that he was with the child, and we were at that moment bystanders, so to speak, as he tuned in to this child. Her name was Mary, and then he lifted up his face and looked at both of us, and he looked and he said, "You have brought into this world a master teacher. Are you ready?" And of course we're ready. This is our daughter. And he didn't elaborate. I don't know what he saw, if anything, beyond that, but he did see that this child came with specific purpose and with a perfect design. We call it handicaps in this world, but it was actually a perfect design to do what she came to do. And what I've discovered now, and this transpired beginning about 8 years ago, when she actually passed away at age 23 from heart issues, unexpectedly contracted some more medical problems that resulted in a fairly sudden death. It took her a week or two to actually pass. But during that time, as difficult as any parent can imagine, when you're seeing your child drift away, during that time, this master teacher came to me in a vision as I was sitting with her at her bedside, and she had difficulty walking and talking in this world, but in this vision I had of her, she was ebullient, she was poised, she was coordinated, and she was walking towards me from a distance. And she held something in her hand, but I was focused on her. I didn't even see what she had in her hand, but as she walked closer and closer and closer, just the light was filling her and me and the surroundings. And when she came about 10 feet away, she held her hands out, and what she showed me was the Course in Miracles books. And what I realized at that moment was, I'd been a course student for a long time. What I realized at that moment was it was time to kick the dust off the books and pick them up again, because I'd let the dust collect on them for some time, and threw myself back into the course. Well, she did pass, and through becoming a serious student of A Course in Miracles, and really my wife and I joining in that, what I've discovered is her gift as a master teacher to us. And what I've discovered is that love never dies. And the love that she expressed to us then still remains. And I've also discovered that it's possible, if I'm willing to let my belief structure loosen up a little bit, to have that experience even in the present moment. It's not tied to a body, it's not tied to a time. But this master teacher came to show us, to show me, that there really is no death. Doesn't mean don't miss her, doesn't mean it doesn't feel rough still at times, but in the reality she did show me, and she did teach me. And there's lots of Mary stories. Lots and lots of Mary stories, and I won't go into those because this is actually about what Paul had set in motion in my mind from the beginning at that christening, and the way he held her and the communion that I saw between the two, and how he helped me, I think even at that point, begin to view this being not as a crippled child, not as even my child, but as a beautiful soul who would come to bless us, and she surely did. So that's my story. Okay. So this one over here, Analia, real quick. Somebody said they wanted to hear how Analia and I met. She's teaching ILC in Evansville, Indiana with Paul. Tarsin is present. I don't think Tar's doing any teaching, and Greg Kelly's there. I don't think he's doing any teaching either. It's just you and Paul. Anyway, so there I am. I'm kind of fairly versed in the Edgar Cayce material, and I've been taking some metaphysical classes at the University of Evansville. Was turned on to Paul Solomon through a teacher there, so I took the class. It was one of those 10-day things like she was talking about a few minutes ago. And the second day or so of class, I go into the bookstore and I want to buy an Edgar Cayce book or something, and she's handling the books at this point. And she dealt with me in the most pristine, beautiful, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like I was just lifted being in this person's presence. And she was very pregnant and very married, so it wasn't like, even though she's quite beautiful, it wasn't anything about that at that point. And so I actually just fell in love with this being and recognized the beauty that she possesses. And from there, there's probably way too many stories, and she wouldn't want me to tell any of them anyway. So I'll just stop there. That's how I met her.